joining us in studio from Renaissance Capital is Yvonne Mhango, who is the East Africa of course, the Sub-Saharan Africa economist, and she has been with Renaissance for about a decade now, and we're very excited to have you, Yvonne. Thank you for joining us. Now, Renaissance has actually said that we're okay with taking on more loans, borrowing further. The country is in a position to do so. What are your thoughts on the already accumulated debt that the country has currently?
Okay, just to clarify that point, the view or the House view at this point in time is that we support the fiscal consolidation strategy that the government has adopted. So we do believe the deficit needs to come down, which implies also borrowing needs to come down. So we don't think it's an opportune time right now to raise more debt, given the risk aversion in emerging markets and given the debt position that the country finds itself in. So at this stage, we think the government is taking the right steps. I believe there's a supplementary budget that has come through earlier this week showing that they're cutting spending in response to a slowdown in revenues, which we think is appropriate for the current environment.
All right. Now, how far do you think, if we do continue to borrow externally, how far would this widen the chasm of debt for the country? Is it prudent?
Okay, well, at this point in time, given the fiscal consolidation path they're following, our understanding is that they will not be in any hurry to take on additional external financing. One, because interest rates are creeping up in international markets, so it's becoming much more expensive to finance debt. And also, Kenya's in a position whereby it wants to sustain its debt metrics and ensure that they don't deteriorate. So I think the risk of external debt increasing over the short to medium term is lower.
All right. Now, you know, the other thing that the report did highlight is that we do not want to go the way Argentina did, where in April we saw against the dollar, you know, it plunged. And of course, investor concerns about the government's ability to control inflation affected them. Dollar debts became more expensive. They had to borrow $50 billion from the International Monetary Fund. Now, how far do you think Kenya is from reaching such a point of that kind of a plunge? Are we secure enough?
I think we're far. I don't think we're at Argentina's point. But if we look at the countries, as I mentioned, the global sentiment has turned negative towards emerging markets, in part because interest rates are higher in the US and the dollar has strengthened. So the countries that tend to be vulnerable in such an environment are those with large twin deficits. And yes, Kenya is symptomatic or has such characteristics. It does have relatively big current account and budget deficit. But is it at the point where Argentina is? No, we don't believe so. We believe part of the reason some of the countries with twin deficits have come under pressure, including Turkey, is also a confidence crisis. People lack confidence in the reform process in the country, and Kenya is not at that point as yet. So we do believe that the country can reform, and it has demonstrated it's willing to do so. We actually think the supplementary budget demonstrates that they're being proactive to try and reduce spending in order to meet their revenue expectations.
All right. And also, it was noted by you that the Kenya's growth recovery was swifter than expected in the macroeconomic context. Now, however, of course, the energy price pressures are beginning to emerge. What effect do these price pressures in terms of energy have currently on Kenya's recovery in terms of the economic growth?
Okay, so as you rightly mentioned, the economy has come back a lot faster than we expected following last year's challenges with protracted elections, the drought, and the rate cap overhang. The risk that we do see emerging, as you've rightly pointed out, is emerging energy price pressures. Non-food inflation came out at 8.6% in August, and that implies headline inflation will be pulled up. So when costs do begin to increase, particularly on the energy front, that can serve as a dampener on growth, so that is a risk going forward. However, we're still confident that the economy can grow at least 5% for 2018.
Okay. Also, the Kenya shilling is overvalued but at low risk of depreciation. Now, what are the factors that are contributing to the overvaluation of the Kenya shilling?
Okay. So, in simple economist speak, what you try and do is look at how if a currency is misaligned from what we call its fair value. In the case of the shilling, according to our real effective exchange rate, it is slightly expensive. Which implies that it's a good environment in which to import because the currency is expensive. You get more dollars for the shilling that you put out. However, going forward, when a currency is misaligned, particularly when it's expensive, the expectation is that it will depreciate. While that is our view, we do think any depreciation will be moderate and it will be well managed.
Okay, so you think there are buffers in place in order to prevent any of that plunging. Now, if the president does sign the draft legislation that retains the rate cap, what effect do you think that will have?
If it's retained, well, it implies that the subdued credit growth we've seen over the past 18 months will be sustained, and it implies that access to credit will continue to be limited. So it is of concern for the banking sector, for households and SMEs, as well as investors in the banking sector, which include the investors that are attending our conference right now.
All right, and of course, that is the annual 4th East Africa Investors Conference ongoing right now.
Correct.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Yvonne, and for shedding some light on a lot of these key issues discussed today on the Business Today show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now,